Hello and welcome to the Cranocast.
Yes.
My name's Rich Hayden. I am the community archaeologist here, and I am sat down with.
I'm Rachel, and I am one of the other community archaeologists and event coordinator, and your wife.
Yes, as well. This is the last podcast of 2022. So at the Cranog Centre, because we're coming up to Christmas time at the Cranog, we celebrate an event, which is why you're sat down today as the events coordinator, is because we have the Yule event, which is on the 17th and 18th of December.
Yes.
That's right. This podcast will be going out on the 18th of December, so it seems sensible that what we're going to do is actually talk about Yule and what Yule is. Okay. So, Rachel, what is Yule?
So Yule is I suppose it's kind of like the traditional Christmas festival. So it's a little bit older than Christmas. Yeah, it's the predecessor. Yeah. So a lot of our traditions today stem from older celebrations around this time of year, or older traditions, such as bringing the Christmas tree into the house, bringing greenery inside. Yeah. It could be the fact that we eat a chocolate Swiss roll on Christmas Day or Boxing Day.
A Yule log.
Yeah, available from all good high street shops. And that Yule log is part of an older tradition as well. Yule itself was celebrated by, the kind of general thing is it's celebrated by people of Western Europe, so the Germanic peoples, of which we are a part.
So, in terms of prehistory of the Cranog, why Yule?
Well, you'll love this. Yule is traditionally celebrated on the 21st or around then of December, which is, well, I'll tell you why. Yule is the longest night, so it's the winter solstice, and the winter solstice is the day when you have the shortest amount of daylight and the longest amount of night, and it's the opposite in the calendar, because we see in like ancient festivals there is often like a dualism across the calendar, or opposites. So for example, you have Beltane and Samhain in the spring and the autumn. But also you have midsummer and midwinter, and midsummer is the day when you have the longest day, and midwinter is the day when you have the longest night.
Okay. So in terms of prehistory, Yule is an important time because
it's the time of when it's this darkest night. There would be celebrations of this sort of time of year because it seems special somehow. You know that after that night, but you hope the sun is going to come back again, and you're going to start to have lighter and lighter months. And there's an association around asking the sun to come back. In terms of prehistory, because we don't have writing from these people, sometimes these traditions and festivals can be hard to trace. The earliest sort of writing, I suppose, we have for Britain, for example, are some of the Roman texts, such as Yule Ius Caesar. But also we've got fragments of the word, for example, in like a 5th century text where it's associated with December, or there's in Bede, the sort of 7th, 8th century text. Yule, is associated with December or January. So again, it's like a time of year.
And then it becomes Yule, and then Yule kind of rolls into traditions that then will become Christmas.
Yes.
Ultimately, as we might call it.
Yeah, and there's older traditions which are going on at the time, so things that people have passed on through not just writing, but also things that people do, and things that people have continued to do for a very, very long time, but also there's traditions that have been kind of reinvigorated over the past few hundred years as well.
Fantastic. And I suppose really midsummer, as you mentioned, but midwinter, it's a seasonal marker in a way, which is really important because, just like the trees losing all their leaves or whatever it might be, it's a point where no matter what, it might not be the same date all the time, it might not be the same thing, but it is a fixed cycle that you're part of. And actually that's something that we believe that in prehistory would have been acknowledged and potentially celebrated based on the fact that going past this time, outside of prehistory and into historical periods, it's a time which is celebrated. Yeah. And that has to come from somewhere. And that's where we go back and take that concept and kind of celebrate it as a prehistoric celebration. Yeah. I use the term celebration, but how would you celebrate Yule or how do we think you would most commonly celebrate Yule?
Well, there's a record from the 8th century, and I can't remember who it's by now, but they said it was, that people would come to a specific place, a special place, maybe a temple or a site of some kind, and they would bring food and they would bring alcohol and beer. It's all good Christmas parties should have. But then they would also bring things like animals, and they would have sacrifices, and they would put blood on the stones. And there was sort of slightly more like morbid association around like the darker side of winter. You see this in other cultures and other traditions, that wintertime can sometimes be associated with the cruelty of nature, but also the fact that nature has to go through winter in order to be reborn in spring. So there's a really interesting kind of balance between the fact that winter, if you haven't had a good harvest and your house is cold and you haven't got the fuel, you're going to have a harder time in the winter. Whereas if you've had a good harvest and you've got more fuel, you might have a better winter. And there's that. It's quite a difficult period, and I think people
quite a dangerous period.
Yeah, and people find different ways around the world to recognise that. Here, there's different traditions. So, for example, we eat the chocolate Yule log these days. That that comes from, I think it's a Norwegian in origin tradition, where you would take a long or large log and place it into the embers of the fire, and it would burn for 12 days. Or some people will cut it up into pieces and use a piece of it every day over 12 days. There's some traditions about putting it under your bed as well. I know. There's bringing the greenery and the outside into the home as well. So like evergreen is sort of representing rejuvenation and strength through the winter, because it doesn't die, so it comes back. Holly might represent hope, for example, and the green man, the man made of holly, walking through this time of year, and then it's the seasonality of that he then comes into spring, and then you get the oak king taking over. So there's different even deities associated with this, depending if you're looking at sort of Viking traditions where you've got Odin and Thor, or you might be looking at the Germanic traditions where you've got like Yule, for example. So there's different people associated with this time of year, depending on where you are.
Or Santa Claus.
Or Santa Claus, or the Green Man, as he did wear a green outfit before a well-known fizzy drink.
Other fizzy drinks available.
I feel like I'm on the radio.
So basically, we can't today celebrate Yule by sacrificing an animal and painting their blood all over a statue. That's not okay.
Although if you're not vegetarian, you might eat turkey.
There you go.
And pigs in blankets.
True. So in terms of actually celebrating it today, we run an event.
Yes.
So Rachel, tell us about the Yule event. What is it that we will be doing over the weekend?
So the Yule event has been designed by our apprentices. So every year we have apprentices at the Crannog who are learning with us and also teaching us how they see the world and how they interpret their heritage. And our apprentices this year have been planning the Yule event around the theme of past, present and future. And this isn't just like the Christmas Carol, the Ghost of Christmas Past, Present and Future. It's also kind of like, because we're in a museum, we hold the past and the objects from the past and the people of the past, but also outside we're doing things towards the future. So we're working with different groups in the present, but we're also about to build a new museum. So what we're doing with the new the new event is looking at how do people celebrate in the past, but also how are we going to celebrate it today, and what does that mean to us? So there's going to be a lot of music and a lot of singing, which, you sing Christmas carols at Christmas time. but there's some Christmas songs which are not Christian. So music is sort of associated with this time for much longer. We also, I think there's a nice parallel there with the apprentices taking over planning the event, because in the Roman times there was the festival of Saturnalia, which is around this time of year, when the slaves would become the masters and the masters would become the slaves for a day.
Yep.
And it's a nice way of taking our youngest members of staff and putting them totally at the top for 2 days, and they plan and deliver everything and tell me what to do, which is fabulous. The other parts of the event that we're going to sort of look at are, for example, asking the sun to return. So if it's the darkest night, you desperately want the sun to come back. And for people's, prehistoric peoples and peoples of much older societies, like the Egyptians, they used to believe that there were certain aspects of, like, I can't remember now, but it's things like the river and the Nile and the sun coming and setting, and that certain things had to happen for the sun to rise again. And you wonder if, you know, the amazement of the sun coming back and the land beginning to grow again, would you be asking for that at this time of year? So we do a lot with lights and fire and things like that on the event. So and have the Yule log with little tea lights and lights all around it that people will light and leave a little wish or a message. The other thing that we're looking at is, because it's the end of the year for a lot of things, so it's like the end of the agricultural year, and for us it's New Year, although for the Celtic peoples New Year may have been in October, November, for example, but around this time of year, end of the old year, beginning of the new. So it's a nice time to reflect. So we were talking about doing what Daisy has called the oath, boast and toast, or the boast, toast and oath story, where as part of your tour you think about things that you have done well in the previous year, and that becomes your boast. I don't know if you've got something you've done well in the previous year. Nothing. Fair enough. Okay, well, you'd think on that and you'd write it down.
Well, so my boast would be that we, alongside the Crown Up team here of Chantel and Jason and yourself throughout the year, have created the 72nd most listened to arts podcast in Belgium.
That is quite a boast. That is quite a boast. I'm just thinking if Chantel's got any boasts. She's shaking her head. No. That's fair enough. So you'd make your boast, and that is something that you can feel proud of from the previous year, because you bring things into the following year. You want to take the good things with you. Then there's the toast. So you lift a glass to someone who is in your life, or who has inspired you, or who's helped you, or who you're proud of. So who would you toast?
Can you toast yourself?
No, but you could. But I think that wouldn't be taking the.
Well, I will toast you then.
Oh, thank you
for doing the events.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so you'll toast me. Then I would like to toast Yule Andrews. There's many more of them. Yulia Roberts, I think, is another one I could do. Then we've also got you've done your boast, which is the year gone by. You've done your toast, which is now.
Yep.
And then last but not least, you've got your oath, and this ties into like New Year's resolutions. Yep. So what are you gonna do in the next few months, or the next few weeks, or the next year that you can commit to? Okay. And as part of that, it's this reflective time of year when it is a little bit dark and you've maybe got more time to think. And I find that here in the winter, that sometimes, because we have so many people visiting in the summer, when we go into the winter season, it gets a little bit quieter. You've got that time to think a bit more and plan. At that time, you make a decision of who you're going to be or what you're going to do in the following year. So what would your oath be?
I'm going to make it the 78th most listened to podcast in Belgium.
You're going back one, or is it go forward?
No, it's 79.
Oh, is it 79? 78th most. Oh, gosh.
That's the aim.
Just need one more listener, Belgium. Just one more.
Belgium, if you're listening, if you can get the word out.
Make Rich's oath come true. Yep. Yeah. So that's the idea, that as you go through the site and you're seeing our past in our museum collection, our present in our Iron Age village, and our future in the development at Delurb, you will also be reflecting on your past, present, and future as well. Yeah. And it's quite a nice way to finish the year.
No, I think it's a good way to finish it, and actually I think it's something that we've touched on in past podcasts this year, actually, around the fact that having that time as as a society to actually, or as an individual, to actually reflect and process and allow you to have time to sit and think. Today we run 1 million miles an hour. Back in the Iron Age, they had more time, don't get me wrong, to maybe think about things, but what they didn't have is, structured support. If you need to process and think about something, a really good and simple way is to go, well, what have I done well? What am I doing right now? What am I going to do next year? And actually, it gives you a really solid way to think about something and progress on it. It's actually probably, and I would hope it would be, a good thing for people just to do anyway.
Yeah.
Even if they do it internally, because I know we've done the toast, boast and oaths in the past, and we've done it as quite a public thing where you all have to stand and say it out loud. But I've never done that because I think it's something that you don't necessarily have to say out loud.
It's personal.
It's something that you can reflect upon, and it's actually just a good process to do internally, if not externally.
And different people, I think, will do it in different ways during the event. So some people may want to do it privately, some people may want to share it out loud, and that's up to that person. I mean, we've last year, Graham and Jason at the Crannog did a Yule event just for the staff, didn't they? And everybody we all turned all the lights off on the site one by one until there was just the fire burning. I actually think it was the year before now. Years merge. But left the fire burning in the Crannog. Yeah, it wasn't last year because we had a Crannog. But left the fire burning in the Crannog, and then that was the only light we had on site. And then from that, we carried out a torch with Jenny leading it, because Jenny, Jason, and Graham all celebrate Yule as a festival. And there's different traditions around this. So Jenny is leading a lot of the interpretation on Yule with the apprentices and how you think about these things. But taking that light from that one fire and taking it to all the other fires around the site and lighting the site back up again as you ask the sun to return. So it's very powerful. I think the other thing about this time of year is just because it's a time of reflection, it's not you sat on your own usually just thinking, but Christmas time is also a time of bringing people together, and a lot of people come together around this time of year. Not just because of Christmas, but also because it's cold, and sometimes it's nice to see people at this time of year, and you get joy from other people's company. So it's all about that community, and that all the different aspects of everybody that works here and comes here gets woven into this whole complete piece. And at Yule time, we then close for a little bit of time, and we reopen, and we take all those pieces and we begin to weave again next year, and the whole community comes together. It begins to make things.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Rachel.
It's all right. Thank you very much, Richard.
That's quite all right. And that was our last podcast, as I said at the beginning, of 2022. We are going now from today, as this podcast goes out, which I believe will be the 18th, we're going to be shutting the Crannog Centre, and we'll be closed now from everything until the 9th of January. We won't be reopening again on the 9th, but what we will be doing is we will be running from hopefully we'll be open at some point in February.
Early February.
Hopefully. We're waiting for the development. Answer your phone. I'm going to pause the podcast now. I'm not pausing.
I think it stopped. I'm so sorry.
Terrible podcast.
I'm so sorry.
You're not welcome back. Rachel will not be back next year. But no, we are hopefully going to open in February, whether that's this site, potentially not. Just as everybody might be aware, if you have listened to the podcast or you know anything about the Crannog, we are building a brand new museum, which will be starting in
January. It's already started.
February.
I'm sure you'll all be very excited about that.
Packing it. And then what we're going to do is once that is finished, we will be opening the brand new site. Okay, so it's a little bit of movement on that, but mid-spring, end spring next year, we'll be open on the new museum. What the podcast will do is we're going to start the podcast back again on the first Sunday in February, and that is going to be the aim. We are hoping everything given it's going to be all video content going forward, because obviously the video content is better. I mean, you get to see my face, I suppose. But also, what we're going to do is it's going to be obviously shift while we're shut some more content around the build and what we're doing. And the hopeful aim in my mind is that we're going to get people in who are involved in the build, talk about what we're building, how we're going to build it, and I'll give you updates as to where we're up to and what you can come and hopefully get involved with as well. Because when we do open next year, what we want to open to is a building and a site with a load of buildings on it that, you know, people feel like they belong to, and not everybody's going to be able to get involved in that build. So actually this podcast is a way to hopefully, for those that can't come, all the people in Belgium that can't come and build and get involved, still feel like they're part of the process.
Yeah, I think it's a really important part of the build. So I think what you're trying to say, Rich, is after Christmas, you'll be back?
Yeah, no. You killed the podcast. One episode.
I'm never coming back on.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we'll see you next year.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Merry
Happy Yule.
Yule.